Good morning, LinkedIn. Happy Thursday. Thursday morning for me, Thursday afternoon for Willem. How you doing, man?
Very good. Thank you very much. And yeah, here on this side of the puddle, it is already 3 o'clock.
Indeed. You're out of the Ireland office, correct?
I am in Ireland. I am not at the office today. Usually I work.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm super excited today to start to tackle. Man, are there too many of these just widely reaching challenges right now? I think there might be, but that's why we're doing uh, this series. And one of my goals with this show is just to start tackling these things that we keep hearing about every day in the HubSpot ecosystem, which I think on some level is natural as the ecosystem is explosively growing right now. The platform evolution is very hard to keep up with, but is providing a lot of valuable tools, to businesses at the same time. And as we transition to, from a kind of a point solution mindset to a customer platform mindset, that impacts onboarding, quite a bit,
Significantly, yeah.
right? So happy you could join today, and I'm really excited, for this series. Because who better to talk to us about HubSpot onboarding than somebody who's doing it every day?
I'm not doing onboarding every day, but basically how it works within HubSpot is we have an onboarding department and we have customer success, and customer success takes over from the onboarding. But that gives me a unique insight into, well, what does onboarding do? How does onboarding look like? And what is actually, because that's for me the most relevant bit, what's actually the result that you get from good or potentially bad onboarding? And how do customers actually look at that themselves? If
Yes.
I think about onboarding, I think I have a number of thoughts. One of them is onboarding is like really, really simple. They already purchased the product. So you can just say, oh, happy days, bye. And you can qualify that as onboarding. Or you can say, no, we are going to look not just at the onboarding, but we're going to look at the recurring impact that we eventually create, and how do we set the customer up for that recurring impact, and what are the steps required for that. And if you look at onboarding that way, all of a sudden, it's no longer the simplest thing in the world, but it's one of the most complex things in the world. And
Yes. And
that's what
it's
we are
only,
going to talk about today.
yeah. And it seems to be getting, more complex by the day, but it doesn't mean it's only inaccessible if like the ecosystem isn't there really to support the complexity. And we both seem to agree that, this change from where we were uh, to this customer platform, all these hubs, all these tools connecting, in my opinion, the first true like unified view of a customer is possible now. Um, how, in your mind, how does that change the perspective from maybe the days of it was a marketing tool to now we're talking about full customer platform?
If I look at the customers that we get, just imagine that we go back in the days and people are looking for a point solution. Let's say I hire HubSpot because that's how I look at the product. I hire HubSpot so I can send out a bunch of emails. Now, realistically, sure, I can look at the content of the email and that sort of thing, but I really am looking for a point solution. And nowadays, since we are really talking about a platform, there really comes the question like, okay, are people, what impact are they looking for short term? And what impact should we be driving long term? So we do get enough customers that really purchase HubSpot just to send out a bunch of emails. And I don't want to oversimplify things, but basically that's the initial impact that they are looking for. So then one of the questions is if we drive that impact during onboarding, and if we get the customer to just be able to send out those emails, is that enough for the onboarding? Or is it actually that you're going to say no, during the onboarding phase, you should set them up for long-term success where you're at least going to highlight the rest of the plan?
Yes. Yes. I think it speaks so well to, because the next question is like, why are we here where we see almost every day on LinkedIn at this point, I'm seeing posts about, either bad onboarding experiences or talking about the challenge or, agencies coming in to save the day, sometimes from each other when they're asked to come in and clean up, you know, HubSpot onboarding experiences and platforms. But I think it's, you know, important for us to talk about it because, for every, let's say 1 out of 5, maybe 1 out of 10, they're not always going to come to somebody asking for cleanup. That's a moment where they have other options in the market, especially if they're used to using it as a point solution and it's not, having the impact they expected. So where do you think there's a disconnect in terms of, that's leading to those challenges that we're seeing?
I think that a lot of the disconnect is at the customer, actually. And of course, the customer will disagree. But for me, it is like if I were your customer, you will sell me HubSpot. Keep in mind that I come to you and I ask you an email solution. Then what is the quickest way for you to sell me an email solution? That will be, let's assume right now that we go for HubSpot. That will be saying, ooh, this is an email solution. This is what it can do. And end of story. Then I come in with the mindset like, okay, I purchased an email point solution. I go through onboarding. What do I want from the onboarding if I'm the customer? An email solution. That's it. And then you come in and you tell me all this thing about a deliverability object and oh, it's terrible. You know what? I just asked for an email solution. And that is where, if the customer doesn't have the vision to really see the bigger picture, then it is really hard, even for an onboarding specialist like we have at HubSpot, to change that mindset, because the onboarding specialist, they look a little bit, of course, at the customer, what the customer is asking. And in this case, the customer is asking for a point solution. And they have the checklist so that the customer knows what the product can do, and they try to set them up for success. But realistically, I don't want to listen. I just want the bloody thing to work.
So maybe some expectation management before we even buy is in order, it sounds like.
Yeah, but there are pros and cons there. If the salesperson wants to sell, and the salesperson, keep in mind, that can be HubSpot, that can be a partner. Right now, it doesn't matter. If the salesperson wants to sell something and the customer is looking for a point solution, and the sales rep is like, yeah, but look what else it can also do. Add 3 months to the sales process. Yeah. And that makes it hard. So then we get to the question like, okay, what is the role of onboarding? And is the role of onboarding so much to get the initial impact, where I'm going to say that's the point solution? Or is it to include the whole strategy and to say, oh, and by the way, you didn't buy a point solution? And that's where I think that it becomes really complex, because let's face it, if you are just looking for a point solution and you set everything up perfectly for that point solution, and then all of a sudden you wake up and you are like, ooh, but I have a customer plan, then you may need to rethink if you set up everything correct. And do you then still have the right people at the right positions for that? Because maybe all of a sudden you don't need a marketing department to look after HubSpot, but you need a RevOps. And I
Yes.
think that that is really one of the things that makes it utterly complex.
Yeah. And I think like, so what I'm hearing there and what I've seen is that really yeah, it's going to add time to any of the processes we're used to. Uh, if we're trying to educate our customers, for success down the line. And something that just came to mind as you were describing that is really the first person um, who kind of takes the easy way out and goes the point solution route right now makes it harder for everybody else later,
Absolutely.
right? And I'm going to share my screen to just show this resource as an example because it's a great example of we cannot avoid, like, once you're in to HubSpot and once you're into the ecosystem, you cannot avoid the fact that this is a full-bodied customer platform now, right? And when
Absolutely.
you're trying to deal with all these different stakeholders, either it's, maybe the marketing person bought it to do emails, but then they've got to get buy-in for the rest of the organization and other stakeholders in the process of this is why we're using HubSpot. This is the information I need. This is how processes need to be updated. So many things involved in basically any change management activity here. You have to be able to communicate, with the other stakeholders, with documentation, with asynchronous, diagrams and maybe videos about what's happening in HubSpot. And anything that you share right now, whether it is a video of you doing stuff in HubSpot or it's documents like this, you cannot prevent the exposure of the other things that the system can do, should do, wants to do, is prompting you to do. And even though you have a very specific goal, whoever you are in this process, the human brain is going to see this other stuff. And if there's any sniff of opportunity of what could be with this investment that I have just made, I'm going to start asking questions about that. And it changes the goals, it changes the expectations very quickly. And you get to the point of, I wish we had known about that, which is one of the main emotions you want to avoid, like in the onboarding and success process, because that will derail a lot of things really quickly.
In a way, yes, absolutely, because it just adds questions, and questions are friction if we think about the flywheel. But in a way, I could also say, what if I was the sales rep, you are a customer, and I'm going to ask you, what are you trying to achieve? What is the initial impact? And right now, I'm deliberately going to use the word initial impact that you're trying to achieve. We have a great solution for that. We're going to onboard you with that. But keep in mind that further down the line, you are buying a complete product that we're going to set you up for a higher return of investment. But first, think first. And we're going to set you up this way. And in 3 months' time, we're going to have another chat. And that's, you're going to sign today. In 3 months' time, we're going to have another chat. And we're going to talk about the full potential that is HubSpot.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. And that's all we're asking here. We're not saying that the whole platform should be sold every time. Like, that's pretty unrealistic, no matter how good that would be for most businesses. Uh, but what we are saying is, like, when they come to you and say, I need to send emails out, like, they can do that with Outlook. They can do that with their email program. Dig it just a little bit deep. You got to get to that goal. And, the 5 whys is so simple to do,
Absolutely.
right? And it doesn't have to add a lot of time, but it gives you those options, and it gives you a path towards letting the customer clarify it for themselves why they need to do this thing. Because very quickly, in almost any point solution use case of HubSpot right now, you're going to get to a data need of some sort. And like in my past roles, it's like, okay, I bring in HubSpot because, I'm leading digital marketing and I just know we need that tool set. But somebody always appreciates the idea of, hey, let's send more emails to our customer. Let's engage in customer marketing. You know, everybody understands the concept of more business from them costs less than more business from new people that we don't know. And then we get to the point where, okay, they agree to do that. Now I need a list of our customers, specifically one that includes email addresses that I can send emails to. Can you give me that? No, because it's buried in the ERP or in various salespersons, inboxes. Okay, then we're not going to be able to, use the tool as intended, or maybe we thought about it just from an email blast perspective. Now we get it. We're like, hey, we should talk to customers too. We don't do that. So just digging a little bit into the why so that you have an opportunity to highlight for the customer, like clarification of their goals, but also um, highlighting other opportunities that you'd like to, address with them down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I'm also thinking about, because keep that in mind, we picked the easiest example. You need an email solution and that sort of thing. So one of the things that we should do during onboarding, and that's what we actively do, is we're going to try to ask, why do you do something? And is that really the right thing to do? Should you send out an email blast to everybody so that they will just mark you as spam and that you can't use those email addresses anymore? Or should you try to say, I'm going to focus more on quality and I'm going to make sure that every email that I send out is customized? And I think that that is really the part where onboarding begins, where you have a sales rep who just tried to hit his numbers. And I'm not saying that that is a bad thing, but keep in mind that any company will look after their investors. And that means we should try to sell a solution with as little friction as possible. And if it's best for the buyer to have the tool, then maybe there's nothing wrong with just selling for the initial impact. And then you're going to question, like, okay, what are you actually trying to achieve? Why are you actually trying to achieve that? What is the process for that? For me, that is part of onboarding. And that doesn't have to be an overly long conversation. And then we're going to look at, okay, so this is the initial impact that we are really going to work on. And further down the line, you're going to potentially work on additional impact, which will create higher return of investment. But that really, for me, also starts with the moment somebody signed, there should be on both sides an onboarding plan. And what I mean that you can't just as a company say, well, you know what? I signed, I paid you a bunch of money, so I expect everything just to go smooth. We're not going to make people available. We're not going to appoint a point of contact. We're not going to appoint a champion. The amount of customers that will not schedule an appointment with one of our onboarding specialists, for me, it's just, I don't understand it.
Well, let me share some insight because this is why, oh man, this is where I get to, like, we're getting to a place where it actually is a disservice, helps no one to start selling this as a point solution and to try and serve that initial request, uh, and not and not take the additional 3 months that it needs to take. Because what you just described there, at least in my experience, means that the organization still has, we'll say, less than a good understanding of what HubSpot is going to do for their business. So much so that whoever's in charge, and I think this is a larger RevOps issue for sure. And, one of my favorite things is working with people who actually have a RevOps position, because that tells me they understand the impact of this stuff on some level. But when HubSpot is provided as a point solution and just to do emails, it is a nice to have every time. And for leadership teams, nice to haves mean those resources are not prioritized. And if they don't see it as a requirement for the success of their business, they will get to it when they get to it. And that includes the onboarding process and all the resources, when I was on marketing teams. But beyond resources, the availability of the people you need to complete the process, which is what you just described. And if you can't make that connection to the business that's purchasing it, these problems, like, this is where I think there's some responsibility on the ecosystem side to help people understand that this is going to happen down the road. Like, yes, we could very easily buy it and have you set up in minutes, but here's what's going to happen if the business doesn't understand what this tool can do, will do for them, and how many people it actually impacts when you try to do that.
Yeah, but we're creatures of habit. We stick to what we're used to. You have somebody higher up at the C level who is like, yeah, I understand the value. I'm actually going to sign a quote. Let's for now say the quote is 3K a month, because I expect this to bring in, basically, to get a return of investment of 6K a month. So basically, I get an additional 3K. It's going to cost me 3K, but the net result is plus 3K instead of minus 3K. Then for a number of months, nothing happens. And you may say, ooh, that means that during, for now, 3 months, that's going to be 9K. No, it's not going to be 9K. You basically are missing out on 6K a month. So that's, if you look at it that way, that's 18K. But what we're forgetting here is the compound effect of growth. So that means you will partially halt your entire organization's growth potentially with 3 months. That's not just 18K. So in that case, shouldn't you make the resources available in one form or the other? And that is where we need C-level buy-in, who will basically just say, you know what, we're done with this. You are going to do this. And if you have a different project on the table, I don't care. You're going to do this. And there's the question, like, how much of responsibility is there in the ecosystem? How much responsibility is there at the customer's side? And that's a difficult conversation.
It is. It is. And it's just like, it's been so enlightening for me this past, almost year now, since I've kind of joined this ecosystem from the inside as a consultant to businesses from the outside, is when I was on the inside and I'm thinking about, how I got buy-in. Never for, like, HubSpot buy-in was never first, right? It was always the strategy of, customer experience focus, making it easier to do business with us, making it easier to be successful with us. And I could create the slides, right, to get buy-in at a conceptual level, but always running into issues when we don't have RevOps and we don't have documentation related to how our systems are working together. a light bulb went off for me this year when I joined, the RevOps bootcamp from HubSpot. And that kind of common language documentation related to process maps and data flow. Like when we're looking at this get started here, and like this piece here, like this is like a like is not a small task for most organizations. And the fact that I worked with several partners, across various companies, and it was rare to have like a process mapping session or a data mapping section or like even talking
Yeah.
about data structure, right? And why why isn't that a more common thing? Why don't more people have that skill?
I think your question is spot on because the question shouldn't be why don't more people think about that? The reason more people don't think about, or not more people think about that, is because they don't have the skill and don't see the issue. And from a personal perspective, I'm going to say you will have to fail a couple of times before you actually see that that's quite important.
Yes. And I will say that's one of the goals or one of the benefits of working with a partner who has failed enough times, because then you don't
Exactly.
have to, right? The double-edged sword of HubSpot is there's at least 10 different ways to do the same thing. And sometimes if you don't have the experience, it will take you all 10 tries to figure out which way. And it's not even which way from a best practice perspective, it's which way for your business it's going to work out based on the people you have and all this stuff. So have you seen, because there's definitely been a growth of RevOps agencies, since
Fortunately, yes.
2020. So that's been helpful, but it's also created some, disconnect at the level of the ecosystem, and the DNA of HubSpot is still very marketing hub esque. So how have you seen, maybe instead of talking about all the problems, maybe we can end on, some successful ways that this gap, has been bridged. What have you been seeing?
For me, the most successful customers that go through onboarding, they really think about their own problems first. They look at HubSpot not as the the go-to for every problem. They don't necessarily even look at HubSpot for a customer platform. They really look at HubSpot as something that gets the job done. And they have a clear definition of the job that needs to get done. And if you have that clear problem, you can start mapping out your process. You will automatically get to the point where you say, ooh, HubSpot is a customer platform, because there's no way around that. But HubSpot being a customer platform should never be a goal. That's just an unfortunate thing that happens while you build out the most successful iteration of your business that you can build out. And I think that to kind of close it off, what you should think about is what is what am I actually trying to achieve long term? Start with the end goal in mind and realize that the onboarding is just the first baby step. Get that solved, you will get the team basically on board. And yes, we talk about onboarding, but you get what I mean, that the team really becomes enthusiastic about HubSpot, about the tool. But I'm going to say more about the process, because at the end of the day, it's just a hammer, it's just a tool.
Right. Yeah. It's much more
And
than just onboarding to the tool. It's often onboarding
exactly,
to the strategy, onboarding to the change that's happening. And this could be stakeholders, new tools, new channels that you're trying, new markets. You've seen it all, right? And there's onboarding when it's just checking boxes for quick wins. Like you get in trouble, real quickly. And
You know how the tool works. We check the boxes, so buy. And that is
right,
not the thing that we should be looking for. We everybody in and nowadays talks about PPT, people, process, technology. I'm unfortunately raised with PPP, people, process, product, but it sounds almost just as cool.
yeah,
And for me, everything revolves around process. The biggest customers that we have include process in everything. And that starts also with onboarding.
yes. And it's not that you don't have a process; it's just not documented. There's either an undocumented process or there's a documented process, but you've
Yeah,
built your
or the
business.
process is just we hire great people and we assume that they know what they're doing. That's also our process. And
Right.
that is one that's questionable.
Yep. And those are the kinds of questions that we will be digging into in the series. And, today, honestly, I failed in, we were supposed to focus only on, the point of view of the customer. I think you did a great job, Willem, of keeping us on track there. Uh, but next week we will be, focusing on the partner side of this. And when I say partner, it's really, anybody who could be helping somebody come into the HubSpot ecosystem, come into any additional level of HubSpot. One of the things that continues to surprise me is a lot of people with Marketing Hub enterprise or professional that really have no idea on what they could be doing with the rest of the platform that they already have access to. So that's where there's
Because they
some,
purchased Upwind Solution.
right. So that's where the partners and anybody helping them, we'd love to, kind of lay out for you some ways to successfully, help them realize the other value they could have from the tool, from the platform, from the ecosystem. And yeah, you're not alone in this endeavor. So that's going to be, the focus next week.
Perfect. Thank you all for listening.
I'm so excited we get to start this series, Willem. And while we, await next week, think about your onboarding. Think about your process maps. At least, like, there's lots of things, but if we can start there, there's almost always opportunity. And when you find that opportunity, uh, you know, think about it and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.